Okay, so now we will have the next presentation. It is Antonio Gandano's presentation, Hut Master, one of the few hut masters that still remain in Spain, and he has been the awardee of the award here in Spain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good afternoon. So it's time to talk about huts. I'd like to introduce a very peculiar work of mine, a hut built in the province of Cádiz, in a municipality which lies at the foot of a castle, Medina Sidonia. And I found my inspiration in flamenco. And I thought of the lyrics of a song that we all know. This is the roof and its shape. Now he's quoting the lyrics of a flamenco song, which after a lot of thinking I've decided not to translate because it's full of references to bullfighting and flamenco, which would make very little sense in English. This is the inside of the roof. This is the ridge beam and the chimney stack. Walls in stone and lime. The inside is very comfy, pleasant, comfortable, very pleasant. Well, the first thing we did when we reached the site was to clean it thoroughly. We remove all of the vegetation, the garbage and whatnot. And then we built a small plateau because the site was in a very steep slope. Water runs throughout the whole property. So we had to build canals and pipes to run the water under the hut so that water could run freely without reaching the hut. We built a ditch for the water to run freely. These are the local stone that you could find in the property was mostly rolling stone. Once we had everything in place, we've leveled the sites. We used stone found in the property. As you can see, it is not very large in size. It is not a very high quality. It's mainly rolling stones of sandstone, very soft. So we started to select the right stone, the best suited for the structure. And we also build walls, retaining walls, like this. Once we had all of the walls in place, as you can see in this picture, the ground had been leveled and compacted. We had already built the drainage ditches. We started to build the draining system, and then we started to install the pillars for a hut. The best pillars are those made of wood. In this case, these are chestnut tree pillars, which is especially suited because it requires no treatment. Well, in order for the pillars not to touch the ground, we just drilled the holes 50 centimeters deep and 40 centimeters wide, and we just filled these holes with ground stone of 15 centimeters in height. Ground stone, not the rolling stones that can be found of the river, because they do transmit the moisture through capillarity, and obviously it would end up reaching the inside of the hut, because it would make the timber damp, and it softens the wood, and it attracts pigeons and insects who lay their eggs, and they end up rotting the timber. Once we had the pillars in place, the next step was to install the loading beam, the loaders, at the upper part. And you have to be very careful with the leveling of the whole structure. And I will explain why in a few minutes. In this photograph, for instance, as you can see, there's hardly any edges in the surrounding landscape, so we did not want to use any edges, but rather using round, naturally curving shapes. As you can see, we have laid 50 centimeters of ground stone to prevent the moisture from entering the hut. And as you can see, we are also building the walls around the hut. Well, the slab uses two types of lime, slaked lime and hydraulic lime. Hydraulic lime is used in small quantities just to speed up the drying process. As you can see, there is no metal mesh or any vegetation in this slab. It has two types of sand and two types of stone and different grain sizes, one of 1 centimeter and the other of a portion of a centimeter. As you can see, there is plastic in the background, because as we build the slab, we immediately cover it with the plastic. So in that way, we don't need to water the slab. And of course, this prevents it from being exposed to the rain, which would eventually crack the slab. 40 days after, we remove the plastic, and the slab is completely free of cracks and compact. While it dries, we gather all of the material we need from the property. In this case, as you can see, we are gathering the grass, and we cut the reed, because we're going to need a lot of reed and a lot of grass. Well, as you can see, the reed is cleaned so that we don't have to clean it at the work site. This is the structure. This is the reed that will be used for the structure, and then we have some pieces of wood which will provide consistency to the structure. In the meantime, we also build the window and door openings, but not with a temporary frame, but with the final frame, window frame in place. Now, as you can see, we start working on the roof, chestnut tree wood, from which we've removed the bark. And at the same time, we work in the facade, the enclosure, and the roof structure. As you can see, we've used a stone base because we need a good seats of the structure and a good hat, if you like, a good roof. And this is what we're doing. The structure is very simple, as you can see. As you can see, we use a lot of nails, which is a very simple procedure. You just have to watch out not to hammer one of your fingers. And then we start using mixing the earth with the thatch with a little water just to dampen the thatch, and we let it dry for a couple of days. So we start filling the outside of the hut, and on the inside with reed, and on the inside we put the reed in place as we work on the enclosure. The fine part has to be on the inside and the cracked part on the outside, just to facilitate the mortar. And it's important that it covers the whole surface, but without excessive pressure. Well, as you can see, we're advancing on the structure, the mezzanine, the garret. We start installing the roof, and we give shape to the roof, as you can see. The reed, the carpentry. There's one man working outside and the other one inside of the hut to facilitate the installation of the roof. The scaffolding system is very simple. The terrace is also finished, and it has a splendid view to the Atlantic Ocean, as you can see. Okay, so we have the roof in place. We're just finishing the closure of the chimney stack, and now we start with the rendering, inside and outside at the same time. In this case, a lime mortar, or rather, we use 3 different mortars. The basic one to facilitate the grip, and the finishing with lime and marble dust. And the ridge beam, as you can see, is also coated with a lime mortar. This is the kitchen, a small countertop just to put a few bottles of water, and a small gas stove. The bathroom, as you can see, is as simple as possible. It's a hut, after all. And this is the chimney flue. The floor is mud. We've built all of the furniture ourselves. Well, the wall of the bathroom, we've used VTC and reed. This ladder, by the way, is made with agave. Agave is a plant that you all know. This one. The floor are mud. These are the bookshelves, chestnut wood, supported by wooden stakes. This is a wooden welcome mat with some details in stone. The handrail is made with olive tree twigs. The patio is paved with rolling stones taken from the river. And that's all I have to say about this hut. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Antonio. That was really fantastic. Thank you. Well, with a good Master Thatcher in front, in control, well, it seems to be a simple enough procedure, right? Well, I don't know. It's my trade, it's my profession. I've always made a living. With these, building huts. For those listening to the English translation, apparently the connection has been lost for a few seconds, but do not worry because we are recording all of the presentations. So if you want to watch the whole presentation, it will be uploaded to the website of the conference and the YouTube channel of the Rafael Manzano Prize. Well, we are going to open the floor for questions. You can address them or ask them rather via the chat line. A question from Mesam Alasali. The maintenance of this type of roofs. How do you maintain them? Well, if you do a proper upkeep of these huts, you can extend their life considerably, but it is not really necessary due to the techniques and the materials that we use. But if the hut is not exposed to the sun or the wind, there's a possibility of fungal invasion, which may require restoration, but maintenance is very simple. You just have to sweep the floor using a broom or a rake, and that's all really. Unless there's a heavy storm or a hurricane force winds, the structures will not be damaged, and birds do not nest on these structures. But of course, there has been a considerable evolution in this technique. This is not the hut as they used to be built centuries ago. The techniques and the materials we use really extend the life of these huts. It can be in place for 30 years without any major issues. Okay, we have another question from Carmen Moreno and Pablo Guerra, who ask about the ridge beam and the type of mortar used for that joint. Well, we use grass which is cut, and we build some sort of a cushion with the remaining grass, and then we put the mortar in place. In this case is slaked lime mixed with sand from the property and then whitewashed. But sometimes we include some stones or a broken tile or even grass mixed to reach the desired thickness, which is around 5-6 centimeters. But we always use slaked lime for this mortar. We never use hydraulic lime because we don't think it is necessary. We have a question from Francisco Castilla. How many operators worked in this project? Well, we had a team of 5 people, and it took sometimes you really have to stop production because you have to prepare the materials and it takes time. It took us 9 to 10 months to build the hut. Of course, the preparation of the site is also hard work, and access to the site is also is quite difficult. So you have to gather the materials, transport them to the site, and this is really slow going. So it took us 9 to 10 months, more or less. Following up on that, Aina Salgado wants to know what the cost of the project was and how much of that was labor and how much of that was materials. Well, the cost is difficult to say because we really had to make a great effort at the earth moving parts of the face of the project. So I cannot give you an exact quote because it depends on the location, but the cost is quite similar to a conventional construction of a certain quality. And I would say 70% of the cost is labor and 30% is materials. Thatch was collected from the property, and the reed as well was collected from the property. The cost of materials referred mainly to the lime and to the chestnut tree wood from trees from the area of Ronda, which is not far from the site. And this was the bulk of the cost, the lion's share. Well, I think that is one of the most interesting aspects of the project. Most of the investment is on skilled labor and not on materials. Yes, Well, Mohammed has said it before. We do have the materials. The problem is the know-how. And of course, you really have to know your materials. The reeds have to be, the best reed is 3 years old. And of course, reeds do not come with a tag saying, I'm 1 year old or I'm 5 year old. You have to know what is the right type of reed. The same applies to the stone. You really have to know what is the right stone for the project. So knowing the materials well really facilitates working with them. You work best when you know your materials. Another question following up on that. What is the approximate difference in cost if this hut had been built with reinforced concrete? Well, probably reinforced concrete is cheaper. Brick, reinforced concrete, and the big construction equipment, which really blazes its way onto the site, destroying a lot instead of building something. Well, of course, it would be cheaper, but in a hut, temperatures remain stable both in winter and in summer. They're pretty cool in summer and warm in winter. They stay within 17 and 25 degrees Celsius all year round, which is pretty good. Whereas a normal house these days, a conventional house, requires heaters, air conditioning, etc. I do not know much about the prices of conventional construction because I've never been active in this type of construction. We work with lime, with stucco in the kitchen, in the bathroom, so the finishing has nothing to do with tiles. For instance, I'm sure that ceramic tiles in a bathroom are much cheaper than the materials that we use. Maybe bricks from an industrial kiln are cheaper than the bricks that we build with earth from the sides. Cari Galindo wants to know how come you became a Thatcher? Well, I was watching these guys building one of these roofs some 30 years ago in a beach in Cádiz, and I just approached them, started talking to them, and I started working with them shortly after. Initially, it was quite tough because in the 80s, no one built huts like this anymore. So once I got home and I told my father, I want to be a Thatcher, he said, are you crazy or what? No one is building huts anymore. Huts are just being torn down or they collapse on their own. But I said, I want to be a Thatcher. And this is what I set my mind to. How did I learn? Well, meeting a lot of people, learning from other professionals, traveling around the world, and always learning. You just have to meet the right people. My own father was born in a hut, in one of these huts. I lived in one of those huts when I was a kid in my grandparents' hut. So this has always been with me. But you really have to have some knowledge of the country, of the materials, of about about harvesting, when and how, when is a material in ideal conditions, when should it be harvested. Well, you have to know the stone, you have to know the earth. Not all earths are the same. And you really have to know these. How? Well, because I've been around these materials all my life. So it's as simple as that. Okay, thank you. We have questions about some specific aspects of the construction technique used in this project, about the process of construction of the walls, the reed formwork that was used. Is it removed after their filling? Well, the cross-section of the reed walls was around 45 centimeters with the including the rendering of the whitewash. We did not remove the reed. The reed stays inside. The reed gives the structure rigidity and stability. And it facilitates the grip of the material because it's not straight, it is curved. So we also use lime, lime mortars of different grain sizes or different roughness. However, we do not use many instruments. We just use simple materials and simple techniques. As you can see, the earth that we use is mixed with grass and left on a grout for 2 days. And the weight of the grass itself brings the grass downward. In some different climates where there is little rain, you can choose not to build a base of 40 centimeters, which is the solution we chose because it rains quite a lot on this in this area. What do you think it would be necessary to improve in the education of architects today so that they take these architectural solutions into consideration? Well, I'm not really an authority on this subject, but I think we should ask architects to try to find out about these techniques, to ask us, the people who know, because this knowledge is being lost, and it's a shame. It's you can train one person, but there are very few people who are working on this type of techniques. You have to know about the different grasses that can be used, and they are not the same, and they don't have the same properties. And a lot of people say, well, this is a fire hazard, right? But but if a spark was applied to a roof, it would take 80 minutes for a flame to appear. So they're not as prone to fire as people think. So I would recommend architects not to be afraid of these type of constructions, because a hut is one of the most primitive forms of dwelling that exist. People started to live in caves and then in huts covered by animal hides, and then they were just replaced by thatch. And these type of huts exist all over the world. And I think, well, a lot of people have just neglected, they have forsaken our roots. We have embraced the churches, cathedrals, and the palaces. These type of constructions are still in place and they are preserved, but some other forms of constructions like huts do not really have the prestige or attract the interest that they deserve. There's a lot of knowledge around these structures, knowledge that has evolved for thousands of years, and in some parts of the world the huts are so sophisticated that they are really luxury houses, like in the French Brittany or in Great Britain or along the Danube River or in Japan. You can find these constructions which are really luxury houses of very high quality. They do not need any heating or air conditioning. And people who live in these huts, they lead a different life. Whenever people enter for the first time into a hut, they just become softer, kinder, more human, if you like. It's a different story. You have no stress anymore, or and this is really a home for many of the, or was a home for many of the older generations. Your grandparents, Caballero Bonal, in his book 3 Days in September, mentions the suburbs of Jerez de la Frontera, and they were just suburbs in which they were just made of huts. And it's a pity because these huts were then just torn down to build a square floor plan building in concrete with an asbestos roof. And of course, this is a disaster because you have to sell heaters and air conditioning equipment to make these dwellings habitable. So, well, I don't know. Well, thank you, Antonio. As Donald Gray, these are really edifying buildings, and I hope we can all contribute to preserve this knowledge that has been alive for centuries, and it would be a shame that it be lost. Okay, thank you.